Greetings, greetings. Today, something that I just want to bring to the table, just to have a communication about is security of women and children. Today, we live in a very volatile society, a very volatile environment. And it goes without saying the things that you see on the news, and people could say it's fear mongering. But you hear of murders and crimes, and now we have so many cases of that's come to the surface now of scamming, in the Black community. It's not something new, but it's definitely becoming more apparent that there are lots of cover ups. There have been lots of cover ups, and there are a lot of things that are not made public knowledge to people. And quite often, people can move in a lot of confusion because we just don't know what's going on, the details, who to believe, which organization to believe. Um, Most organizations have their own writers or PR or people that put together their propaganda. Um, the different sides to a story, this person's side, that person's side, and then it's actually what happened. And people's interpretations is often connected to their belief system or what they want to believe. So today we want to hone in on security of women and children. And this is not to discount men. However, women cannot physically penetrate or force sex on an adult male, and children are a priority. And I would say this also goes for young teens, 13, 14, 15, 12, 11. Those are still children. I've heard some people they're not very small children, but they're children nonetheless. So with so much confusion and lack of values, I'm hearing adult males, and many people will be very confused about boundaries. Who's a child, who's not a child, who has the right to speak up. I don't see it being acknowledged that children don't have a thought process or thinking process like adults. So, as folks that are growing up without some firm value systems in place and some boundaries, it really seems like folks' judgment is very skewed. So, as far as security, first of all, just want to just touch on some action steps that people can take, and some things that don't cost people a lot of money. We can really use technology for something positive and something for folks to look into that is free. There's an app called Alfred. I make a recommendation that sisters, women, look into downloading this app. If you have old phones, as many of us have old phones that are lying around, you can use your old phone as a security system. The app is called Alfred, and you can have a viewer, and you can have use another phone as a camera. So if you have several old phones, you can monitor what's going on in the front of your house. You can record somebody. So these are just things for us to think about. Some of us may, may think it's not spiritual to think of protecting yourself or to have security, that you shouldn't have to think that way. However, quite often our logic is clouded by our belief system. And I think it's also very interesting that there's certain groups that are encouraged and that also on our own perpetuate a belief system that it is not spiritual to protect yourself. Now, if we look around logically, this is not all peoples of the world, and it's not even practical, right? Because how could you be spiritual when you're at risk, right? Are you going to try to chant mantras and just be praying when somebody's trying to violate you or your children? So again, the name of the app is called Alfred. You can download it for free, and you can use it on with your other old phones to use them as a security system. And again, I was one of those people that never wanted to think about these things, or not foolish, but not really having such a focus, a quote. I would think it was like a fear focus, to focus on protecting myself. But it's occurred that it's practical, and that it's common sense. So that's number one, was the app. The other thing for people to consider and to take seriously, especially women and mothers, It's another surge again. It is not new. Women are being made to feel that they're not being feminine, or this whole talk of women being masculine, all these labels for not protecting themselves. This is totally illogical. This is illogical. So, these ideas that we have of wearing pink or having curls in our hair and being very femme fatale and damsel in distress is not going to cut it when there is a predator coming after you or your children, or when you need to access the confidence within you to speak up when there's a wrongdoing, when there is molestation or violation, physical violation of women and children. So it is totally illogical for us to be perpetuating that it is not feminine or that you in some way being masculine when it comes to defending yourself. Because if it's one thing I have become very clear on, it was my godfather that said this to me years ago. We're a very colorful people, Black folks. And we use our hands and our language. We like to get loud a lot. And, we talk a lot of smack. But when it comes down to it, when you're in a situation where you're physically in danger, quite often, many of us have not trained the muscle to be strategic or to be a critical thinker. Many of us may not look to see exit signs, or we may freeze up if an emergency were to actually happen, or if we feel a sense of allegiance or I love someone, illogical affection for someone, then we may question our judgment when it comes to taking ourselves and our children out of harm's way. And this can give us a type of split thinking, where we're just not thinking with our own best interest first. Because when it comes to the safety of women and children, it's not for us to consider anything else. You don't have the time to play religious games or have a lack of confidence when it comes to your safety. Well, quite often you may have seconds to make a decision to move or to defend yourself. And, brainwashing or just semantics or the use of words to have people confused about which way to go is not to be underestimated. All of your intellect and all of your know-how can be short-circuited by just certain triggers, certain fears being triggered with the pictures that are on TV with guns and war and fear of dying on a cross, and all these different images promote fear. One of the basic fears is of pain, sickness, and death, and the fear of what's going to happen in the quote unquote afterlife. And all of these things can short circuit our ability to move and to think fast and quick and to be able to respond in a life or death situation, or to be able to respond and move ourselves and our children out of harm's way before a particular damage is done. And it is not to be underestimated. So there's the app, Alfred. Also, something for women to consider is to get fit, to be able to run out of harm's way, to be able to pick your children up, your sister, your mate, to be able to grab your family members and get out of harm's way, to be able to haul behind and to move on a moment's notice, to be able to train your brain to respond to a situation, to be able to assess what's going on, to be able to assess patterns, even if you don't know all the details. We can use our emotions as a tool to check in if something feels right or it doesn't feel right. Where we may not want to rely on emotions is when it comes to logic. For example, oh, I love this person. They're such a nice person. Any predator knows 101 how to push buttons, especially when it comes to women and children, and to gain access into your heart and into your emotions. And quite often, our emotions will short circuit logic, resulting in us allowing predators into our home or into close proximity around our children, into our community, or by giving away too much information. Quite often, in being nice and being friendly, quite often we'll give away personal information, financial information, telling times of our coming and going at the bus stop. If we're in a relationship, not in a relationship, we give too much, too soon, too fast. And this is not good for security. So something for us to think of as mothers, as nurturers, as protectors is being responsible. And our responsibility is to protect ourselves. If we don't protect ourselves, we're not going to be able to protect our children and our families. And that goes with along with a vetting process. What is a vetting process? First time I heard the word vet, I didn't know what it meant, but I'm always one, if I don't know, I can find out. And a vetting process is basically going to be a test, a litmus test. How can you tell who it is that you're dealing with at any particular time? And it is very necessary that we run a litmus test to be able to discern the feelings and the good words that people are telling us from their actions and their character, particularly if you're seeing them on the internet, if you've never known them before, if you're thinking of entertaining somebody in an intimate relationship. We need to have a litmus test. Too much, too soon, too fast, allowing people into your home space, giving them your address, giving them all your personal information. Unfortunately, many of us have been programmed to be polite and nice and just answer everybody's questions, and we're made to feel, or societally, the social cues, or we feel like we're being rude if we don't give away all of our information, if you don't want to shake somebody's hand, if you don't feel comfortable with them. We're made to feel like we're being rude if we don't allow people into our personal space. But security is very, very important. So people only respect consequences. A predator is only going to respect consequences. Even somebody that may be going off crazy on the train, right, on public transportation. Usually, even in all their offness, they will know who to approach and who not to approach, unless they're totally gone, right? And there's absolutely no discernment. But people will know sometimes who to pick on, or they will get a sense of who will not give them a run for their money, who will not resist, who will not fight back, who will not speak up, who's trying to be so polite that they're not going to say anything or to question them on their actions, right? So it's very, very important that we have the confidence to speak up for, not so much for love and affection. This goes especially when it comes to love and affection, because you feel emotionally attached to someone, and then we wind up not questioning people. So we don't want to give people our financial information, our address, our plans. Unfortunately, a lot of us learn this the hard way, after damage is done, or after we may have gotten into a situation only after it's too late, when you've engaged intimately with somebody, or when you've given somebody access to your resources or to your personal space, or you're isolated in what seems to be a dangerous relationship, and you realize this person has access to all of your information. So we really need to, or let me say, it's really beneficial to us logically to have and to create healthy boundaries with everyone. And this could even apply to females. It applies to females too, because quite often cult leaders will use the point of least resistance. They would use as a beard, right? As a cover. They would use other women to bring other women into the fold, right? Because they're not threatening. Or who doesn't trust a woman or children, right? Quite often, children and young people, or a cult leader could even manipulate someone's children, right? In order to get to the resources of the parents, because parents quite often, especially mothers, would do anything to protect their children. So again, we want to focus on security for women and children. And this is not to say that all of us don't need security. Again, it's very important that the first priority is women and children, because if they're not protected, then these will grow up to be males and females who are damaged, who won't have a vested interest in protecting women and children. And the men folk have to be protected as young people and as children, so they have the space to grow and to flourish into healthy male adulthood with their psychology, their mental and emotional, all intact. So I'm not in any way saying that men's lives aren't important, but the first priority is women and children when it comes specifically to safety. So it's not for men to feel offended. I mean, you got to really think about, for men to feel offended when women don't want to give their personal information, or they don't want to be touched when they don't have a relationship. It doesn't make sense for men to be putting their hands on other people when you don't have that kind of relationship. And even within a familial setting or community setting, we have to have these uncomfortable conversations of not touching and having a respect. It's more important and beneficial to have the respect rather than somebody liking you. The respect is not there. So as a result, there aren't any healthy boundaries. Um, and a vetting process, right? A process in which we run a litmus test, a background check, not only through the police station, but a background check on people's character, right? And this is where the emotions can come into play. It could be beneficial, or they can be used and manipulated so that you're not sharp and that you're not thinking logically. And again, I would say this would fall primarily on women because it's easy to get through our heartstrings when there's fear involved or when there are women and other children involved. So we have to do our research and ask around, use the internet, but also use our common sense and to vet people's character. Why in this day and age we think that people's past doesn't matter? People have habits, and habits are very hard to break. And habits is only one level, but people's habits, and I would say as a litmus test for young women, all women, but just for women and mothers and young women, look at people's character. Are they a liar? Do they tell the truth? Is their story consistent? Um, Even more so, if you disagree with someone, do they fly off the handle and do they have a blow up if you don't agree with their perspective? This will tell you a lot about somebody's character. Do they seem violent or do they blow up if you don't agree with them? Because that can make you feel very unsafe if someone can't respect that people have a difference of perspective and a difference of opinion. So that can definitely be something that we use as a litmus test. Something we look at is, can people handle respectfully you're disagreeing with their perspective? Can they handle if you respectfully ask that you don't want to be involved with them intimately, that you're just not interested without having to explain yourself, whether you're married or whatever the case is, whatever your relationship status is, that you just don't want to engage in that way? Can that be respected? Can somebody respect that you're asking questions? Does somebody fly off the handle if you ask questions pertaining to safety, or if you're asking about their history, especially if this is someone that would like to, or that professes that they want to have a relationship with you? Are you able to ask for evidence of their, at some point later on down the line, their financial status? Or do they pay their bills on time? Um, what's the nature if they have children? What is the nature of their relationships in terms of their responsibility to their children? So there may be some people, they have all different kinds of things going on in their life, but are, in whatever respect, key word for discernment, are individuals, male and female, are they responsible when it comes to their children? This will tell you a lot about someone's character. Because if someone cannot be responsible with their own offspring, then it doesn't make them, I know it's not so much about good, bad, but this is just telling you something about whether they are even ready to be in another kind of relationship with someone else. Because responsibility is I think should be right up there with consciousness and spirituality. I think it's been observed that responsibility is so much more effective. So if folks are irresponsible with their own health, if they're irresponsible with their finances, if they're irresponsible with commitments they've made in their personal, intimate relationships, if they're irresponsible when it comes to their children, then logically, you should not expect this person to be responsible to you. And this is what often the programs of romance and these fantasies of how we want to be treated, um, they just they do us a disservice. They're not practical, and it's setting up a vicious cycle of results that we've seen before. We can't expect to get a different result if someone does not have a consistent track record of responsibility. It's not saying that someone can't have exes, because relationships, they happen. That's a part of life. But whatever their status is, responsibility is the litmus test, is the key thing that we're looking for. Is there a priority in terms of their relationships? If they have made a commitment to a relationship, have they fulfilled that commitment? If they are no longer in that relationship, did they leave it responsibly, right? Where they're not leaving frayed edges, where they made clear agreements in terms of parting ways, finances, resources. Are people responsible in their actions? Because their actions are what is really, really going to hold weight and what's really going to count. So there's all this talk on the internet of listen to the messenger and not the message. And this is so key to folks playing with semantics and basically running game, right? Because the message may be clean and pure, and those are even trigger words, clean and pure. These are all open to interpretation. But if the message is one that yields results, if it's practical, if there are actions attached to it, somebody can say that they're good, they're pure, they can use all of these key phrases. But if it's not showing up in their behavior, then there's nothing wrong with the quote unquote message of what's being said, but we're looking for it to be illustrated in their behavior. That's what counts. So the message doesn't belong to a particular person. And many predators will have a tendency to pimp the message, right? And so younger people may not have a frame of reference to articulate such things so they can be taught, or we, if somebody can even be chronologically older but inexperienced in another sense, and games can be run on us. This happens all the time with preachers, ministers, religious leaders, conscious leaders, because we may not be as crafty with words to be able to answer certain philosophical questions. It is easy for us to be talked into circles. So the message is what the message is. But what's going to hold weight is people's behavior. So how well they're able, the person that's transmitting the message, how well they're able to translate it into their own behavior consistently over time. For example, people may have a past, but how can you tell that they have moved past their past? This is very key, I would say, for young people, especially young women. If someone has a past, how can you tell that they have healed from their past? Or that could be very subjective, all these spiritual terms thrown around, healed. How can you tell that they have matured from their past, learned from their past, that they have changed their ways? That can only be seen in someone's consistent behavior over time. Otherwise, folks need to be left alone so they can process that information. And when you can see demonstration of change consistently over time, character and behaviors, and you still have more of a litmus test to go through before you let someone into your psyche, your personal space, or before you take them at their word. We're in a time where you cannot take people at their word. For security, you cannot take people at their word. It is very dangerous to listen to people because they're telling you all the words that you want to hear, and it sounds good, and they're telling you about, wow, how could they know these things about my life and my life story? Anyone that's advanced, a pimp, a predator, it's not really hard. Or you think of fortune tellers. It's somebody that understands human psychology and that can watch patterns. It's not very hard for them to assess people, right? And especially those that have not exercised that muscle of critical thinking, or they haven't had a challenge, they haven't exercised that muscle. Or they may not be as much of a as skillful at words, right? It's very easy for people to read people, especially if that's their profession, if that's the way that they eat. So the other thing that we just wanted to, and kind of in the same vein, not is to just discuss not being distracted by the message. This is also a technique of many predators. The message sounds so good, so real, that we get distracted by the message and we short circuit our logic. Again, we don't want to be distracted by the message and we get hit with these cold, hard truths. For example, it's a fact that when we put certain chemicals onto our scalp and they go into our brain, they contribute to fibroids. They can damage and give, scabs and scalds on the scalp. And physically, it can affect us very negatively, just on a physical level. So when we have these new conscious leaders telling us some basic truths about, our hair and our esteem, and it touches something because they're so raw with it, we want to follow people for telling us some information that is very basic, but is really something for people to come to within their own being. And so then we'll take someone that has given us basic information like it's new and enlightened us, and we've made these big changes, and we'll call them a savior. Or someone gives us information about fruits and vegetables when any human being can benefit from fresh, whole living fruits and vegetables. And then we'll say they're the savior because this is the person that gave us, that jugged us and really touched that emotional trigger that now we were able to change. This is like basic information. It really boils down to responsibility for not numbing out with vices. This is basic information, but will allow somebody to take basic information, sell it to us as if it's new, and then call them and put them on a pedestal of savior. And this can be very, very dangerous. So we don't want to be distracted by a message that is very, very basic, because we could be indirectly using as people to avoid taking responsibility for things that we know we need to change on our own. And to have somebody take that responsibility, whatever that savior may be, whatever they may look like, whatever you want to call him or her, is very dangerous, because you may be getting more than you bargained for with the so-called savior or earth solar messiah. So again, another quick litmus test is we want to look at how people treat themselves, if they have care for themselves, right? Is this person a person that is very risky and puts themselves in harm's way? I'm not talking about calculated risks. If somebody was taking a calculated risk on leaving the United States, building a home, having a business venture, there's nothing wrong with that, exploring the world. But a calculated risk would not be putting family members in harm's way, knowingly, and being reckless and putting people in harm's way, and looking at how people treat children, right? How they treat children and other people when no one's looking, how people treat animals, and how people treat the environment. These can be signs of a person's character. And there's a difference in discernment. There's a difference from condemning someone and assessing someone. A lot of times people will say, don't judge, don't judge. And that's why we want to be very careful and alert when it comes to semantics and wording, because there's nothing wrong with judging people in the context of assessing who someone is by what they do, how they perform, what is their character. You should be judging people. There's a difference between judgment in that context and judgment in the sense of condemnation, that we're condemning someone based on if they have locks that they could, or they espouse words of consciousness or love or healing. They say these words, that means that they are beyond certain kinds of behavior, because we're definitely in a period where people just don't want to believe that a savior could do certain things. I mean, in the sense of priests and priestesses. And unfortunately, this is not only Catholic priests. These are people of all different cultures around the world. Even in Africa, there's an abuse. And this can be male and female. There can be abuse of positions of parents or a position of leadership. For whatever reason, greed or just imbalance, or this person themselves, this priest or priestess, may have been abused in their own life. So we don't want to put anyone on a pedestal and think they are beyond certain kinds of character and a foul character. And if we put our trust into someone, trust is something that has to be earned. This is something else that we can use as a security system. I was told when I was inside of the Kwatamani cult, I was told by one of the head wives that I should just trust the high priest, Kwatamani. And based on what I had seen of him from afar with his family and his children, and should anyone ever decide to go that way, do understand you're going to be limited access. Now, in the context, nobody needs to let someone totally into close proximity of their children and their family. But if you're coming in into a community, right? If you're coming into a community, you should be able to ask questions, and you should be able to discern certain patterns. So you trust to a certain point what you can see, what you can ask questions, what you can verify. But if you cannot vouch for somebody's character who you have not lived with, you have not seen them under pressure, you have not seen them when they're challenged, when they ask a question, if you haven't seen them in all different kinds of circumstances consistently over time, you do not know these people because you think you like them, or you like certain things about their character that is appealing to you. You like their dress, you like the way their children appear to look, you like their hair. This is not telling you enough about someone's character. And we want to be able, for security purposes, right, to be able to protect ourselves and our heart, keep our emotions in check. Emotions are a very important tool, but we want to be able to keep them in check and use that tool when necessary. But we don't want the emotions to cloud our logic and our common sense. This is one of the first steps and a key step to brainwashing, when you can get so confused and your emotions are being used to neutralize your common sense. So I'm going to think about security, right? This is a day and age where it's necessary for women, and this is not the first time in history. It was necessary for women to be fit enough to protect themselves. And I'm going to encourage women: do not buy into this thing, that this concept or this label that you're masculine for doing something as natural as protecting yourself and protecting your children and the children of the community from predators and folks that have demonstrated that they are irresponsible when it comes to the protection of women and children. It's not about someone liking you, or being somebody's friend. If we do not protect the children, we're going to continue to have unhealthy adults, males and females. The children must be, at the point we decide to bear them and bring them into this world, then it's our responsibility to take care of ourselves, to be healthy and fit mentally and emotionally, because nobody's coming to save you. There is no Messiah. If you want a Messiah, you're going to have to look in the mirror, and you're going to have to cultivate that Messiah within you. And it can be something as basic as getting hold of your vices, neutralizing your vices, developing a work ethic, removing vices and addictions to foods that are poisonous when it comes to your brain and your breasts and your womb and your body temple. When it comes to cleanliness, we underestimate these very basic things. These things, we associate them with religion, but this stuff has nothing to do necessarily with a religion. It's not owned by any religion. But these are some basic things that we're responsible for in our own lives. If we're not responsible, just not being responsible has a tremendous impact in making us vulnerable to predators. So security, physical security. As much as we want to talk spirituality and meditate and chant Om and put bindis on the head, security is a fact of life. If you're thinking of moving to the tropics or to another country or culture, and while you're busy having your fruits and vegetables and all this other stuff, you want to be safe. You're going to other communities, other cultures. You want to be safe. So how do you qualify who you are able to move with? Many of us have never considered, using a firearm, but that may be a reality. So that may be something for women to consider, if nothing else, so that you're not fearful. I'm not promoting violence, but I'm also not saying that it's not it may be necessary when it comes to defending yourself and your children. That we have to get over this thing, or people trying to put this thing, that it is not feminine, that you are being masculine if you're protecting yourself and your children. This is not up for debate. It's not time to be polite to someone that's trying to rape you or that's trying to force sex onto a child. That's not the time. That's not the time to be chanting and praying and praising the Lord, when someone is violating. It's just not. And it's almost like all of these sayings and this religion has given us a lobotomy when it comes to common sense reasoning. We don't want to wait for an emergency to think I coulda, woulda, shoulda. Been able to get my cardio up. Quite often we only think of fitness in order to go to the beach or to be attractive to someone, and we're not even thinking about, in our later years, you being mobile. Because if you don't take care of yourself, you will wind up indirectly making yourself prey, because you can't defend, you can't run, you can't even walk with a sense of confidence, because you have not taken care of your primary vehicle, which is your body temple. You may be too inflexible, you may be unstable, and you're more prone to falling off of a curb and injury. And then you won't feel as confident or secure to be able to fight off an attacker. This is unfortunate. it's not even unfortunate. It is what it is. This happens in nature. In nature, it's not personal. But I do want to encourage women to know that it is very, very, there's nothing more feminine. There's nothing more feminine than being able to take care of yourself and your children. And anyone that's telling you that that is masculine, you know, that's their issue. That's their personal issue. But there's, I mean, think about it. What is attractive to you? Is it attractive? Someone that won't, that's sitting there crying and waiting for somebody to take care of them when the children are being attacked, when the children being molested. And quite often, if there's no male protection around, what are you going to do? Are you going to be sitting waiting? You might be waiting a lifetime. And by the time that happens, if it doesn't happen, the children have been tampered with and damaged. And then there's a cycle of dysfunction that continues within our community. So, in terms of security, fitness and health is a priority. That right there should be an incentive to eat fresh, whole, living fruits and vegetables. It's not so expensive as junk food, because if you're eating foods that are non-foods, they cost you more. They cost you your energy level. They cost you your ability to be able to think critically, right? Because the primary organ is the brain, right? The brain is telling everything else what to do. If you're not furnishing the brain, which is a fatty tissue, living organism, the body is not a graveyard. If you are not putting fresh, whole, living fruits and vegetables, how can you expect the computer center to be able to make quick, sharp decisions? So this, other than just the natural hair movement and having pretty acne-free skin, those things are very superficial, but they are a sign of health. Let us have an incentive to eat fruits, vegetables, legumes, beans, things that are cruelty free, so that we even have the energy, to make quick, fast, rapid decisions and be effective in our decision making. In order for that to happen, we want to protect our precious brain, right? This has nothing to do with religion, right? We want to make this a way of life and a priority that is so much more and effective, has so much more possibilities than going somewhere and marching. It's at this point, it's easy to march, but it's much more challenging, though it can be much more rewarding, to eat fruits and vegetables. It's simple. It's not rocket science. It's amazing that we allow people to sell back this basic intuitive information to us and to sell it back to us. It's one thing to learn other ways to prepare the fruits and vegetables, techniques and skills, but just in terms of understanding fruits and vegetables, keeping the body healthy, this is basic knowledge. This is really basic knowledge. It's basic information. It's not rocket science. It's something, especially as women, intuitively, we know it's something that is in alignment with our best health and the health of our children. So hopefully that is an incentive for you to eat simple, eat good. If you don't eat garbage, you don't have to work so hard to try to run it off on the treadmill. And also in alignment with fitness, we don't necessarily want to fake fitness. We could just do some dumbbell curls, but if we had to go lift buckets of water to garden, or if we had to lift ourselves over a fence, we don't have any practical fitness and decision making, but we can't get out of harm's way. We can't hoist ourselves over a fence. So I also want to encourage you to look into functional fitness. And I do make an effort to share that kind of information, because these things don't necessarily require a gym. There's so much that is not necessarily required. And then also security also is connected to our economics. We want to be able to have economics in place so that if you need to leave a dangerous situation, you can leave, right? Because you have savings, right? You want to be able to position yourself. If you need to feed you and your children and your family, you can do that honorably without having to put yourself in harm's way, right? There's no guarantees, but you can be assured that if you have been responsible, and if you make a responsible choice instead of wasting, I mean, I say wasting, if you decide, make a decision to spend all your money on just your superficial, and everything, and the hair is looking good, and we're looking good from the neck up, the wrists down, and the ankles down, and we haven't paid any attention to our health, then all of our money is going to be siphoned off for medical expenses. And then we don't have the money for land, things that will make us feel secure, to make sure that our rent is paid, to make sure that we have living expenses stored up. And you want to be around other people that have that mindset, or cultivate that, or at least open to that. Other people, cultivate relationships where people see that as beneficial and the most common sense thing to do, so that we are not totally bamboozled and manipulated by folks selling us back ourselves, selling us basic information. Fruits, vegetables, being natural, healthy is beautiful. Healthy is beauty. So if we're not putting garbage inside the body, everybody's beautiful in their natural state and when they're healthy and they're in a good mood. If the body's not weighed down with toxins and weighed down with depression. So again, the main focus of today's video is security. Please check out the app Alfred, which is free, that you can use as a security system. Do make fitness a priority, if even, and I can say, as even though I've worked in the fitness industry for a few decades, I can also say that there was a time, and there's always been time, where as a mother, I would have to do fitness first because of how it made me feel inside of my living space, even if it was a small living space in the city, in order for me to feel better. Right? That was the first reason why I did it, mentally and emotionally, for me to feel better in my apartment with virtually no equipment. So if you have a big enough why, you can get it done. Right? There are plenty of videos on YouTube. There's so many resources that we have access to. So fitness is a priority. Security, and not giving all of your information, your personal information, answering everybody's questions, allowing people to touch you and to touch your children. That is sacred space, and that should be earned. That should be earned. You don't know these people on the internet. I don't care how much locks they have, red, black, and green. If they're dressed up like a pope, if they're dressed like an imam or rabbi. All of these, even the outfits, are programs. And they're things we've been conditioned to buy into, to automatically give someone trust that has not been earned. You cannot vouch for these people's character. And as far as the message, this whole thing with listen to the message, not the messenger, be very careful, because language and semantics is a very, very slick, effective thing. It's not hard to get over on people who have such a desire to want to believe in something, which quite often can be people just wanting some kind of immediate relief without having to make changes. And this can make us very vulnerable to predators. So please share this video with some young people, especially young women and mothers that you know that could benefit. Because the reality is, we don't want to allow predators into our hearts, into our minds, because once you allow and you engage and you have these exchanges, these intimate exchanges with people, and you have them in your psyche, it's hard to get them out. Just like a bad habit, with eating potato chips or devitalized foods that are not healthy, but they seem to be giving you some kind of gratification, some type of so-called pleasure. Some people say they love cigarettes and they love drugs, you know what I'm saying? But you got to really investigate, what is the love? So security of women and children is priority, because if we have that security, then it's more likely we will contribute to cultivating healthier men, and we can make healthier choices in our mates. And a healthy male is going to be more attracted to, it just makes sense to me, to women that have a standard for themselves. And if someone has a problem with you having a standard of security and not allowing people into your space, then most likely they're not the folks for you, if you decide to have a high standard for yourself. So please share the video. Yeah, and take care.